The cold moon surface stretched endlessly in all directions, covered with gray dust that had not been disturbed for millions of years. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of Forward Base Alpha, watching the alien ships through the reinforced glass. The ships looked like floating crystals, each one bigger than a city block. They moved slowly around the moon, their surfaces glowing with soft blue and green lights that pulsed like heartbeats. Jake had been a soldier for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like this. The Zephyrian Collective had arrived 3 months ago, claiming they owned this part of space. Earth's government had tried to negotiate, but the talks had failed. Now both sides were preparing for war. The base was busy with activity. Soldiers ran from building to building, checking weapons and equipment. The air recycling systems hummed constantly, working hard to keep 3,000 people alive on this airless rock. Jake could feel the tension everywhere. Everyone knew that if fighting started, they would probably all die. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Rodriguez walked up beside him. She was the communications officer responsible for monitoring all alien transmissions. Her dark eyes looked tired from weeks of listening to the strange sounds the aliens made when they talked to each other. Any changes in their patterns? Jake asked. Lisa shook her head. They keep sending the same harmonic frequencies. Our computers can't figure out what they're saying, but the tone is getting more aggressive. Their ships are moving closer to the base every day. Jake nodded grimly. The Zephyrians had technology that was far beyond anything humans had ever built. Their energy weapons could turn rock into vapor in seconds. Their shields could stop any missile or laser beam that Earth's military could fire at them. The only reason they hadn't attacked yet was probably because they were still deciding if humans were worth the trouble. Commander Paul Henderson entered the observation deck, carrying a tablet with the latest intelligence reports. He was a big man with graying hair and a serious expression that had gotten more serious every day since the aliens arrived. The situation is getting worse, Paul said. Long-range sensors show more Zephyrian ships approaching from their home system. We could be facing 500 ships by next week. Jake felt his stomach tighten. 3,000 human soldiers against 500 alien warships. It wasn't a battle. It was going to be a massacre. What about reinforcements from Earth? Jake asked. Admiral Collins is coming with a fleet, but they won't arrive for another month. The aliens will probably make their move long before that. Lisa looked at her communication device as it started beeping. I'm getting new transmissions from the alien fleet. The patterns are different this time. She adjusted the controls and put the sounds on speaker. The observation deck filled with strange musical tones that rose and fell like waves. The sounds were beautiful in a way, but also cold and alien. Jake couldn't understand how anything that made such sounds could be reasoned with. It's their collective consciousness, Lisa explained. All the aliens on all the ships are connected somehow. They think and make decisions together. That's why they're so coordinated in everything they do. Dr. Amanda Wright, the base's xenobiologist, had been studying the aliens since they arrived. She entered the observation deck carrying a stack of research papers and looking exhausted. I've been analyzing their behavior patterns, Amanda said. The Zephyrians evolved on a planet where cooperation was essential for survival. Their entire species thinks as one giant mind. They see humans as primitive because we're all individuals with separate thoughts and feelings. Jake looked out at the alien ships again. They were arranged in perfect geometric patterns, moving together like parts of a machine. No human military force could achieve that level of coordination. What do they want? Jake asked. This moon sits on a major space lane between star systems, Amanda explained. They want to build a base here for their expansion into this part of the galaxy. They see Earth as an obstacle that needs to be removed. Paul checked his tablet again. Our spy satellites show them building something on the far side of the moon. It looks like a massive weapon platform. The weight of command settled heavily on Jake's shoulders. He was responsible for the lives of everyone on this base. Earth. Command had given him orders to hold the position at all costs, but costs like this had never been calculated before. How do you fight an enemy that can coordinate perfectly and has weapons that can destroy entire planets? We need to think differently, Jake said finally. Conventional military tactics won't work against them. We need something they won't expect. Lisa's communication device beeped again. This time the alien sounds were different. They were louder and more urgent. They're increasing their transmission frequency, Lisa said. It's almost like they're getting excited about something. Through the observation deck window, they could see the alien ships changing their formation. Instead of the loose patrol patterns they had maintained for weeks, they were now forming tight attack groups. The lights on their crystalline hulls were pulsing faster and brighter. They're preparing for something, Paul said. Maybe they've decided to attack. Jake felt time running out. Every hour that passed brought them closer to a war that humanity couldn't win. The aliens had every advantage except one thing that Jake couldn't quite identify yet. There had to be something about humans that the Zephyrians didn't understand or couldn't predict. In the distance, he could see human soldiers going about their duties. Some were maintaining equipment, others were standing guard, and a few were sitting in small groups during their break time. One young soldier was sitting alone near the communications array, writing in a small notebook. Jake had noticed him before. The soldier wrote in that notebook every day during his free time. The soldier was Private First Class Danny Clark, a young man from Kentucky who had joined the military after finishing college. He was quiet and thoughtful, different from most of the other soldiers. While others played cards or talked about home, Danny preferred to write. What's our best assessment of their weaknesses? Jake asked Amanda. Amanda thought for a moment. They're incredibly advanced technologically, but there might be something about their collective consciousness that we don't understand yet. They think as one mind, which gives them perfect coordination, but it might also limit them in ways we haven't discovered. Jake nodded. The collective consciousness was both their greatest strength and possibly their only weakness. But how could humans exploit something they didn't understand? The base's alarm system suddenly activated, filling the air with warning sounds. Lisa checked her instruments quickly. Multiple alien ships are approaching the base, she announced. They're moving faster than before. Through the window, Jake could see 6 Zephyrian ships heading directly toward Forward Base Alpha. Their crystalline hulls were glowing brighter than ever, and they were moving with obvious purpose. Battle stations, Jake ordered into his communication device. All personnel to defensive positions. The base erupted into controlled chaos as soldiers ran to their assigned positions. Weapon systems came online and defensive shields activated, but everyone knew these preparations were mostly symbolic. If the aliens wanted to destroy the base, human defenses wouldn't stop them. Jake remained at the observation deck, watching the approaching ships. This might be humanity's last hour on this moon. He thought about Earth, about the billions of people who didn't know their fate might be decided by whatever happened here in the next few minutes. The alien ships stopped just outside the base's perimeter. For several long minutes, nothing happened. Then slowly they began to retreat back to their original positions. What was that about? Paul asked. Lisa was studying her instruments frantically. I'm not sure. It was like they were testing something, but not our defenses. They were scanning our communications equipment. Jake had a strange feeling that something important had just happened, but he couldn't figure out what. The aliens had approached for a reason, but they hadn't attacked. They had learned something from their scan, but what? As night fell over the lunar surface, Jake knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges. The aliens were planning something, and humanity had to be ready. But ready for what? How do you prepare for an enemy that thinks in ways no human can understand? The war hadn't started yet, but Jake could feel it coming like a storm on the horizon. And when it arrived, everything would change forever. 3 days after the alien ships had approached the base, Private First Class Danny Clark was sitting in his usual spot near the communications array. The sun was setting behind the lunar mountains, casting long shadows across the base. Danny opened his small notebook and began to write, just as he had done every evening since arriving on the moon. Danny had always loved words. Back home in Kentucky, he had spent hours reading poetry books in his grandmother's library. She had taught him that poetry was a way to capture feelings and share them with others. Even here, surrounded by weapons and worry, Danny found comfort. In writing down his thoughts, tonight he was writing about the stars. Through his helmet visor, he could see thousands of them scattered across the black sky. They looked peaceful, unlike the alien ships that moved between them like glowing threats. Danny wrote about how the stars had watched over Earth for millions of years and how they would continue watching long after humans were gone. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Rodriguez was working late in the communications center. She had been monitoring alien transmissions for so long that the strange harmonic sounds had become like background music to her. Tonight was different, though. Her equipment was picking up some kind of interference. At first, Lisa thought it was just equipment malfunction. The base's power grid had been unstable lately due to the alien ship's energy fields. But as she listened more carefully, she realized the interference had a pattern. It wasn't random electronic noise. It was someone speaking. Lisa traced the signal and discovered it was coming from Danny's personal communication device. Somehow his tablet had connected to the main transmission array when the power fluctuated. Whatever he was doing was being broadcast on the same frequencies the aliens used to communicate. Lisa was about to shut down the transmission when something extraordinary happened. Through her monitoring equipment, she could see the alien ships changing their behavior. For weeks, they had been moving in aggressive patrol patterns, always ready for battle. Now they were slowing down, forming different shapes. The ships were arranging themselves in circles and curves instead of attack formations. Their lights, which had been pulsing with sharp, military precision, were now glowing in softer, more rhythmic patterns. It was as if the entire alien fleet had suddenly become calm. Lisa grabbed her portable scanner and ran outside to find Danny. She found him still writing, completely unaware that his words were being transmitted across space. To hundreds of alien ships? "Danny, you need to keep doing exactly what you're doing," Lisa said breathlessly. Danny looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "Your tablet is connected to our communication system. The aliens are receiving whatever you're saying, and they're responding to it in ways we've never seen before." Danny looked at his tablet, then at the alien ships visible in the distance. "You mean they can hear me reading my poetry?" "Not just hear it, they're reacting to it. Look at their formation patterns." Danny stood up and looked at the alien fleet. Even to his untrained eye, he could see that something had changed. The ships were moving slowly and peacefully, almost like they were dancing instead of preparing for war. "What should I do?" Danny asked. "Keep reading," Lisa said. "But let me record everything and monitor the alien response." Danny opened his notebook again and began reading one of his poems about missing home. He spoke slowly and clearly, letting his voice carry the sadness and longing he felt for the green hills of Kentucky. As he read, the alien ships moved closer. Together, their lights dimming to a soft glow, Lisa watched her instruments in amazement. The alien ships weren't just changing position randomly. They were responding to the emotional content of Danny's poetry. When he read about sadness, their lights grew dimmer. When he read about hope, the lights grew brighter. It was as if the aliens were feeling the same emotions that Danny was expressing. Captain Jake Morrison was reviewing defense plans in his office when Lisa contacted him on the emergency channel. "Captain, you need to come to the communications center immediately. We've discovered something incredible." Jake hurried to the communications center, where he found Lisa and Danny surrounded by monitoring equipment. The displays showed alien ship movements that Jake had never seen before. "What's happening out there?" Jake asked. Lisa explained how Danny's poetry had been accidentally transmitted to the aliens and how they had responded. She showed Jake the recordings of the alien ship's behavior changes, how they moved in harmony with the rhythm and emotion of the poetry. Jake looked at Danny, who was still holding his notebook nervously. "You're telling me that your poetry is affecting an entire alien fleet?" "It seems that way, sir," Danny replied quietly. Jake studied the monitoring displays. The alien ships were maintaining their new peaceful formations even though Danny had stopped reading. It was as if they were waiting for more. "We need to understand this better," Jake said. "Lisa, get Dr. Wright down here immediately. And Danny, I need you to try reading something else." Dr. Amanda Wright arrived within minutes, carrying her portable analysis equipment. She had been studying the aliens' collective consciousness for months, but this was the first time she had seen them respond to human communication in any meaningful way. "This is unprecedented," Amanda said as she reviewed the data. "The Zephyrians have never shown interest in human language before. They've always communicated through harmonic frequencies that bypass individual thought." Danny read another poem, this one about the courage of soldiers facing impossible odds. As his words reached the alien ships, their formation changed again. They spread out in protective patterns, with larger ships surrounding smaller ones. "They're not just hearing the words," Amanda explained excitedly. "They're experiencing the emotions behind them. The collective consciousness that makes them so militarily effective also makes them incredibly sensitive to emotional resonance." Jake began to understand the implications. "You're saying they can feel what Danny is feeling when he reads his poetry?" "More than that," Amanda said. "Their entire species evolved on a planet where emotional harmony was necessary for survival. They developed their collective consciousness to share feelings and thoughts instantly. But in becoming technologically advanced, they may have lost the ability to experience individual emotions." Lisa played back the recordings of the alien responses. Each poem had created a different reaction. Love poems made the ships form protective circles. Sad poems made them move slowly and carefully. Poems about nature made them spread out like they were exploring. "It's like they're learning to feel individual emotions for the first time," Amanda said. "Through Danny's poetry, they're experiencing what it's like to be human." Jake realized they had stumbled onto something that could change everything. The aliens weren't just advanced machines. They were living beings who had given up something essential to become collectively powerful. And now, through poetry, they were remembering what they had lost. "We need more people involved in this," Jake said. "If poetry can affect them this way, we need to find other soldiers who can write or read poetry effectively." Danny looked surprised. "You want to use poetry as a weapon?" "Not as a weapon," Jake said, "as a way to communicate. Maybe even as a way to prevent a war." Over the next several hours, Jake quietly spread word through the base. He was looking for soldiers who had any background in literature, creative writing, or public speaking. The response surprised him. Many soldiers had hidden talents they had never shared with their fellow troops. Sergeant Maria Santos had been a high school English teacher before joining the military. She volunteered immediately, bringing with her a collection of poetry books she had smuggled onto the base. Corporal Ben Taylor revealed that he had performed spoken-word poetry in Detroit before enlisting. Staff Sergeant Kelly Murphy shared haikus she had written about her experiences as a combat medic. As word spread, more soldiers came forward. They brought poems they had written, books they had hidden in their personal belongings, and memories of verses they had learned in school. What had started as Danny's accidental transmission was becoming something much larger. Lisa worked with the volunteers to test different types of poetry and measure the alien responses. She discovered that the aliens reacted most strongly to poems about human emotions they had never experienced. Love, loss, hope, fear, and individual courage all created powerful responses from the alien fleet. By the end of the day, Jake had assembled a team of 20 soldiers who could effectively read poetry to the aliens. They called themselves the Communication Squad, though Jake was beginning to think of them as something more important than that. As the lunar night fell, Jake stood in the observation deck watching the alien ships. They were still maintaining their peaceful formations, their lights pulsing gently like sleeping giants. For the first time since the aliens had arrived, Jake felt a spark of hope. Maybe there was a way to avoid the war that would destroy both species. Maybe poetry, the most human of all arts, could build a bridge between two completely different forms of consciousness. The aliens had superior technology, but humans had something the collective consciousness had lost: the ability to feel deeply and express those feelings in ways that could touch other hearts. Jake looked at Danny, who was still writing in his notebook. The next morning, Captain Jake Morrison converted an old storage building into a secret workspace. He called it the Communication Lab, but everyone who worked there knew it was something much more important. 20 soldiers sat in a circle, sharing poems and stories while Dr. Amanda Wright monitored the alien fleet's responses through her equipment. Danny Clark had become the unofficial leader of the poetry team. He sat at the center of the circle, his notebook open, helping other soldiers find their voices. Many of them had never shared their creative work with anyone before, and they were nervous about reading aloud. Sergeant Maria Santos was different. She had taught English for 10 years before joining the military, and she understood the power of words. She brought boxes of poetry books from her personal collection. Books by writers from every part of Earth. She spread them out on tables, around the room like tools in a workshop. Poetry isn't just about making things sound pretty, Maria explained to the group. It's about taking feelings that are hard to express and putting them into words that others can understand. That's exactly what we need to do with the aliens. Corporal Ben Taylor was excited to be part of the project. Back in Detroit, he had performed spoken word poetry at coffee shops and community centers. He understood rhythm and timing, how to make words hit with maximum impact. When he read one of his poems about growing up in the city, the alien ships formed tight clusters, like they were trying to understand what it meant to live in a crowded, noisy place. Staff Sergeant Kelly Murphy had been writing haikus about her experiences as a combat medic. Her poems were short but powerful, capturing moments of life and death in just a few lines. When she read a haiku about saving a wounded soldier, the alien ships moved in patterns that looked almost like they were protecting something precious. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Rodriguez worked with the team to improve their transmission methods. She had rigged up a better communication system that could broadcast their voices more clearly to the alien fleet. She also monitored the aliens' responses, taking notes on which types of poetry created the strongest reactions. The aliens respond differently to different emotions, Lisa explained to the group. Love poems make them form protective circles. Sad poems make them move slowly and carefully. But the strongest responses come from poems about hope and courage in the face of impossible odds. Dr. Wright had been studying the aliens' collective consciousness for months, but the poetry project was giving her new insights. She discovered that while the aliens thought as one mind, they were still individuals underneath. Each alien ship seemed to respond slightly differently to the same poem, suggesting that individual personalities existed within the collective. It's like they're remembering what it was like to be individuals, Wright explained to Jake during one of their private meetings. Their collective consciousness made them incredibly efficient, but it also made them lose touch with personal emotions. Through our poetry, they're experiencing individual feelings for the first time in thousands of years. Jake realized they were dealing with something much more significant than military strategy. They were helping an entire species rediscover part of themselves that had been lost. But he also knew that time was running out. Earth Command expected him to prepare for war, and the alien fleet was growing larger every day. The team expanded their work beyond just reading existing poems. They began creating new poems specifically designed to communicate with the aliens. Danny wrote about the loneliness of being far from home, something he thought the aliens might understand since they were also far from their own planet. When he read it, the entire alien fleet formed a single, massive circle around the moon. Like they were embracing it, Ben Taylor worked with rhythm and repetition, creating poems that had strong beats like rap music. He discovered that the aliens responded to rhythm almost as much as they responded to emotion. When he performed the poem with a steady, heartbeat-like rhythm, the alien ships began pulsing their lights in perfect synchronization. Maria Santos brought historical poetry to the project. She read works by ancient poets from China, Africa, and the Americas. Each culture's poetry created different responses from the aliens. Chinese poems about harmony with nature made the ships spread out peacefully. African praise songs made them form celebratory patterns. Native American chants about connection to the Earth made them lower their altitude until they were almost touching the moon's surface. The most surprising discovery came from Kelly Murphy's medical background. She wrote a poem about healing, about taking care of others even when you were afraid. When she read it, something unprecedented happened. The alien ships began approaching the human base, not in attack formation but slowly and carefully, like they were trying to offer help. They're not just experiencing our emotions, Wright realized. They're learning from them. The collective consciousness that makes them so militarily powerful also makes them incredibly empathetic. They're starting to care about us. Jake felt a mixture of hope and worry. The aliens were becoming less aggressive, which was good. But they were also becoming more curious about humans, which could be dangerous in different ways. If they decided humans were too primitive to deserve their technology, they might still choose to eliminate them. The team worked around the clock, taking turns reading poetry to the aliens. They discovered that the aliens never seemed to sleep, so they could broadcast continuously. Different soldiers took shifts, creating a constant stream of human emotion and experience flowing toward the alien fleet. Commander Paul Henderson had been skeptical of the poetry project from the beginning. He was a military man who believed in weapons and tactics, not words and feelings, but even he couldn't ignore the results. The alien ships had completely changed their behavior. They were no longer preparing for war. "I don't understand how it works," Paul admitted to Jake, "but I can see that it does work. The aliens have powered down their weapon systems. They're not patrolling aggressively anymore. Whatever you're doing, it's working better than any military strategy we could have tried." Jake knew that the success of the poetry project was creating new problems. How do you explain to Earth Command that you've prevented a war through poetry? How do you convince military leaders that words can be more powerful than weapons? The answer came sooner than expected. Long-range sensors detected a massive alien fleet approaching the solar system. It wasn't just more Zephyrian ships. It was their war council, the most powerful vessels in their civilization. These were the ships that made decisions for the entire collective consciousness. The war council only mobilizes for major threats, Wright explained. If they're coming here, it means the collective has decided that humanity needs to be dealt with permanently. Jake felt his hopes crashing. The poetry project had worked with the local alien fleet, but now they were facing the leaders of the entire Zephyrian civilization. These would be the oldest and most powerful minds in the collective, beings who had made countless decisions about the fate of entire species. How long until they arrive? Jake asked. Lisa checked her instruments. 3 days, maybe 4. Jake looked around the communication lab at his team of soldier poets. They had discovered something revolutionary, but would it be enough to stop a war council that had probably destroyed dozens of civilizations? Danny was still writing in his notebook, working on a new poem about friendship between different species. Ben was practicing a spoken word piece about understanding across cultural differences. Maria was researching ancient poems about peace and reconciliation. Kelly was writing haikus about hope surviving in the darkest times. They were just 20 soldiers with notebooks and voices, facing the most powerful military force in the galaxy. But they had something the aliens had forgotten they needed: the ability to feel deeply and share those feelings with others. "We need to prepare for the biggest poetry reading in human history," Jake told his team. "When that war council arrives, we're going to show them something they've never experienced before. We're going to show them the full range of human emotion and creativity." The team looked at him with determination. They understood the stakes. If they failed, humanity would face annihilation. If they succeeded, they might create the most important friendship in the history of both species. Outside, the alien ships continued their peaceful formations, waiting for their war council to arrive. Soon, everything would change. The question was whether poetry could triumph over the oldest military minds in the galaxy. Admiral Patricia Collins arrived at Forward Base Alpha with a fleet of 30 Earth warships, ready to end the alien threat once and for all. She was a veteran of 3 interstellar conflicts and had never met an enemy that couldn't be defeated. With superior firepower and tactical planning, as her shuttle landed on the lunar surface, she was already planning the assault that would drive the aliens from human space. Captain Jake Morrison met the Admiral at the landing pad, knowing that the next few hours would determine the fate of both species. Admiral Collins stepped out of her shuttle wearing full battle armor, her face set in the grim expression of a commander preparing for war. "Captain Morrison, I'm here to resolve this situation," Admiral Collins announced. "My fleet is positioned to begin the attack as soon as we coordinate our ground-based defenses with the orbital assault." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Admiral, with respect, I believe we found a better solution to the crisis." Admiral Collins looked at Jake like he had lost his mind. "Captain, we're facing an alien invasion fleet. The only solution is to destroy them before they can attack Earth. What could possibly be better than eliminating the threat?" Jake knew how ridiculous his next words would sound. "Poetry, Admiral? We've been communicating with the aliens through poetry, and they've responded positively. They're no longer aggressive toward us." Admiral Collins stared at Jake in silence for several long seconds. "Captain, are you telling me that you've been reading poems to alien warships instead of preparing for battle?" "Yes, Admiral. And it's working. The alien fleet has completely changed their behavior. They're no longer in attack formations, and they've powered down their weapon systems." Admiral Collins looked around the base, taking in the defensive preparations that had been largely abandoned in favor of the poetry project. "Captain, I'm relieving you of command. This base will prepare for immediate military action against the alien threat." Jake had expected this reaction, but it still hit him hard. "Admiral, please let me show you what we've discovered before you make any irreversible decisions. The only thing I need to see is the destruction of that alien fleet." Admiral Collins replied firmly. At that moment, Lieutenant Commander Lisa Rodriguez came running toward them, her portable scanner beeping frantically. "Captain, we have a major problem. Long-range sensors are detecting the Zephyrian War Council fleet. They'll be here in 6 hours, not 3 days like we calculated." Admiral Collins looked at the scanner readings. "How many ships?" "Over 1,000, Lisa replied. "These aren't just military vessels. They're mobile cities, each one carrying millions of Zephyrians." Jake felt the weight of the situation crushing down on him. 1,000 alien warships against 30 human ships was not a battle. It was the end of human civilization. All the more reason to attack the local fleet now before reinforcements arrive, Admiral Collins said. "We'll destroy the ships already here, then fall back to Earth and prepare our defenses there." "Admiral, attacking now will ensure that the War Council destroys us all," Jake said desperately. "But if you give me one chance to demonstrate what we've learned, we might be able to prevent this war entirely." Dr. Amanda Wright had been monitoring the conversation through the base communication system. She approached the group carrying her analysis equipment and looking more excited than anyone had seen her in weeks. "Admiral Collins, I need to brief you on what we've discovered about the Zephyrian collective consciousness," Amanda said. "The poetry project has revealed something extraordinary about their species." Admiral Collins looked impatient. "Doctor, I don't have time for scientific theories. I have a military situation to resolve." "This is military intelligence, Admiral," Amanda insisted. "The Zephyrians' collective consciousness makes them incredibly powerful, but it also makes them vulnerable to emotional manipulation. Through poetry, we've been able to influence their behavior in ways that traditional warfare never could." Commander Paul Henderson, who had been silent during the exchange, finally spoke up. "Admiral, I've been skeptical of this poetry project from the beginning, but I can't argue with the results. The alien fleet has been completely peaceful for the past week. Their behavior patterns have changed dramatically." Admiral Collins looked at the faces around her. These were experienced military officers, not dreamers or idealists. If they believed in the poetry project, maybe there was something to it. "You have 1 hour to demonstrate this technique," Admiral Collins said finally. "If it doesn't work, we attack immediately." Jake felt a surge of relief mixed with terror. 1 hour to prove that poetry could save 2 civilizations. He quickly gathered his team in the communication lab where Danny Clark and the other soldier poets were already preparing for the most important performance of their lives. "Everyone listen carefully," Jake announced to the team. "We have one chance to show Admiral Collins that our approach can work. The Zephyrian War Council will be here in a few hours, and if we can't convince our own admiral that poetry is effective, she start a war that will destroy us all." Danny looked up from his notebook, where he had been writing frantically for the past hour. "Captain, I've been working on something special. It's a poem about 2 different species learning to understand each other. I think it might be exactly what we need." Maria Santos had gathered poems from every culture on Earth, focusing on themes of peace, understanding, and cooperation between different peoples. "We should create a sequence that shows the full range of human emotion and experience," she suggested. Ben Taylor was preparing a spoken word piece about the beauty of diversity, how different perspectives make both species stronger. Kelly Murphy had written a series of haikus about healing and growth through understanding. Admiral Collins entered the communication lab with several of her senior officers, all of them looking skeptical. The room was filled with soldiers holding notebooks and poetry books, preparing to broadcast their words to an alien fleet. To military minds trained in conventional warfare, the scene looked absurd. "Begin your demonstration," Admiral Collins ordered. Jake nodded to Danny, who stepped up to the main communication system. Through the lab's windows, they could see the alien ships maintaining their peaceful formations around the moon. Danny took a deep breath and began to read his new poem. His words spoke of 2 strangers meeting in the darkness of space, each afraid of the other, each wondering if communication was possible across the vast differences between them. He read about the fear of the unknown, but also about the hope that understanding could bridge any gap. As Danny read, everyone in the lab watched the alien ships through the windows. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the ships began to move. They formed new patterns, more complex and beautiful than anything they had created before. Their lights pulsed in rhythm with Danny's words, creating a light show visible across the lunar surface. Admiral Collins watched the display with growing amazement. "How are they doing that?" "They're responding to the emotional content of the poetry," Dr. Wright explained. "Their collective consciousness allows them to experience human emotions. Through our words, they're not just hearing the poem. They're feeling it." Ben Taylor stepped up next, performing his spoken word piece about diversity and cooperation. As he spoke, the alien ships began to form intricate patterns that seemed to celebrate difference rather than eliminate it. Ships of different sizes and configurations worked together to create geometric shapes that were both beautiful and purposeful. Maria Santos read an ancient Chinese poem about harmony between different elements of nature. The alien ships responded by creating flowing, organic patterns that resembled rivers and clouds. They were learning about human concepts of beauty and balance. Kelly Murphy's haikus about healing created the most profound response yet. The alien ships approached closer to the base than they had ever come before, but slowly and peacefully. Like they were offering comfort to the humans below, Admiral Collins stood in silence, watching displays of alien behavior that contradicted everything she knew about military strategy and interspecies conflict. The aliens weren't responding like enemies. They were responding like beings who wanted to understand and be understood. "This is unprecedented," one of Admiral Collins' officers whispered. At that moment, Lisa Rodriguez's long-range sensors began screaming warnings. The Zephyrian War Council fleet had arrived at the edge of the solar system, 6 hours ahead of schedule. Over 1,000 massive ships were approaching the moon, their energy signatures blazing across the scanner displays. "The War Council is here," Lisa announced grimly. Admiral Collins looked at Jake with new respect. "Captain, I'm putting you back in command of this operation. If poetry can influence a local fleet, maybe it can influence a war council. But if this fails, we'll be facing the destruction of human civilization." Jake looked at his team of soldier poets. They had proven that words could move alien hearts, but now they faced the ultimate test. Could 20 humans with notebooks and voices convince the most powerful military force in the galaxy to choose peace over war? The alien war council ships were visible now as points of light moving across the starfield. Soon they would arrive, and everything would be decided. Poetry had brought them this far, but the real challenge was just beginning. The Zephyrian War Council fleet filled the space around the moon like a second set of stars. Each ship was enormous, bigger than anything humans had ever built. Their crystalline hulls glowed with ancient power, and their weapons could destroy entire planets. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the communication lab watching the display, knowing that the next few hours would determine whether humanity survived or became another extinct species in the galaxy. Admiral Patricia Collins had given Jake complete authority over the operation, but she remained in the lab with her senior officers. Everyone understood the stakes. If the poetry project failed, there would be no second chances. The War Council had come to make a final decision about humanity, and that decision would affect billions of lives. Danny Clark sat at the main communication system, his hands shaking slightly as he prepared to address the most powerful beings in the Zephyrian civilization. He had written a new poem during the past few hours, something that spoke about the loneliness of being the only one of your kind in a vast universe. He hoped it would help the War Council understand what it felt like to be human. Dr. Amanda Wright was monitoring the alien ships with every piece of equipment on the base. The War Council ships are different from the local fleet, she reported. Their energy patterns are much more complex. These beings have been part of the collective consciousness for thousands of years. They might be harder to reach through poetry. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Rodriguez had boosted the communication system to maximum power. We're ready to broadcast to the entire War Council fleet. Every ship will receive our transmission clearly. Jake looked around the room at his team of soldier poets. Maria Santos held a collection of peace poems from every culture on Earth. Ben Taylor was preparing a spoken word piece about the beauty of different species working together. Kelly Murphy had written haikus about hope surviving in impossible situations. Sergeant Tom Brady, a new volunteer who had joined the team that morning, had brought folk songs from his home in Ireland that spoke about finding friendship in unexpected places. Remember, we're not just reading poems to aliens, Jake told his team. We're sharing the entire history of human emotion and creativity. We're showing them what makes us who we are. The local Zephyrian fleet, which had been peaceful for days, suddenly began moving into new formations. They positioned themselves between the human base and the approaching War Council ships, like they were trying to protect the humans from their own leaders. The local ships are acting as intermediaries, Dr. Wright observed. They've been affected by our poetry, and now they're trying to influence the War Council on our behalf. Admiral Collins watched this development with amazement. In 30 years of military service, I've never seen anything like this. The aliens are protecting us from their own forces. The War Council ships slowed as they approached the moon. Their massive hulls cast shadows across the lunar surface, blocking out entire sections of stars. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the largest ship, a crystalline structure the size of a small city, began transmitting harmonic frequencies that filled the communication lab with alien music. They're trying to communicate with the local fleet, Lisa translated. The War Council wants to know why the local ships are protecting humans instead of preparing for battle. Jake realized this was the moment they had been preparing for. Everyone ready? We're going to perform together all at once. Danny, start with your poem about loneliness. Everyone else follow his lead. Danny began reading his poem about being alone in the universe, about wondering if there was anyone else out there who could understand your thoughts and feelings. His voice carried across space to over 1,000 alien ships, each one containing millions of beings who had given up individual emotion to become part of something larger. As Danny read, the War Council ships began to respond. Their lights, which had been harsh and military, started to pulse more gently. Some of the smaller ships moved closer to the moon like they were trying to hear better. Maria Santos joined in next, reading a poem by an ancient Persian poet about two strangers becoming friends despite speaking different languages. Her words blended with Danny's, creating a harmony of human voices that reached across space to touch alien minds. Ben Taylor added his spoken word piece about diversity, making both species stronger. His rhythm and energy brought a new dimension to the performance, showing the aliens that human creativity could be both gentle and powerful. Kelly Murphy's haikus about healing and growth created moments of quiet beauty between the longer poems. Her simple words about finding hope in darkness seemed to resonate deeply with the War Council ships, whose lights grew softer with each verse. Tom Brady began singing an Irish folk song about travelers from distant lands finding welcome around a fire. His voice was rough but sincere, and the melody added an emotional layer that pure words alone could not provide. As the human chorus continued, something extraordinary began to happen. The War Council ships started moving in patterns that matched the rhythm and emotion of the poetry. Instead of maintaining their aggressive military formations, they began creating flowing, artistic shapes that celebrated the beauty of the words they were hearing. Dr. Wright watched her instruments in disbelief. The War Council ships are synchronizing their collective consciousness with our poetry. They're not just listening, they're participating. The largest War Council ship suddenly stopped transmitting its harmonic frequencies. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, through the static and electronic interference, a voice emerged that spoke in broken but recognizable English. "We hear your hearts," the voice said slowly, each word carefully formed. Lisa Rodriguez worked frantically to improve the communication link. "They're learning to speak our language in real time. The collective consciousness is processing our words and figuring out how to respond." Admiral Collins stared at the communication equipment in amazement. "They're talking to us. After months of harmonic frequencies we couldn't understand, they're actually talking to us." The alien voice continued, growing stronger and clearer with each word. "We came to judge if humans deserve to survive. We thought you were primitive, unworthy of advanced technology." Jake felt his heart pounding as he realized they were hearing the voice of an entire civilization making a decision about humanity's fate. "But your poetry shows us something we have forgotten," the voice continued. "Individual feelings, personal experiences, the beauty of being alone, in your own mind, while still caring for others." Danny stepped closer to the communication system. "We wanted to share our feelings with you. We wanted you to understand what it's like to be human." "We understand now," the alien voice replied, much clearer than before. "Our collective consciousness made us powerful, but we lost the ability to feel what you call individual emotions through your poetry. We remember what we gave up to become what we are." Dr. Wright was recording every word of the conversation. This was the most important first contact in human history, and it was happening through poetry rather than diplomacy or warfare. "We will not harm your species," the War Council announced. "Instead, we wish to learn from you. We will share our technology. If you will teach us to feel again to create beauty with words and music, like you do." Jake looked around the communication lab at his team of soldier poets. They had done something impossible. They had prevented a war not through superior firepower, but through the simple act of sharing their deepest feelings with beings who had forgotten what individual emotion felt like. Admiral Collins approached Jake with a new respect in her eyes. "Captain, you've just negotiated the most important treaty in human history. How do we explain this to Earth Command?" Jake smiled for the first time in weeks. "We tell them that humanity's greatest weapon isn't our technology or our military tactics. It's our ability to feel deeply and share those feelings with others, even beings who are completely different from us." Over the following days, the lunar base was transformed from a military outpost into a cultural center where humans and Zephyrians worked together to explore the depths of emotion and creativity. Danny Clark became the first human ambassador to the Zephyrian Collective, teaching alien minds how to write poetry and express individual feelings. The Zephyrians shared their advanced technology freely, but more importantly, they learned to feel joy, sadness, hope, and love as individuals within their collective consciousness. They discovered that being connected didn't mean losing the ability to have personal experiences and emotions. Maria Santos established the first interspecies literature program, where human poets and Zephyrian artists collaborated to create new forms of expression that neither species could have imagined alone. Ben Taylor started teaching rhythm and performance to aliens who had never experienced music as an individual art form. The war that had threatened to destroy both civilizations became the foundation of a friendship that would change the galaxy. Human creativity and Zephyrian technology combined to create possibilities that neither species had dreamed of achieving alone.